Tonight on Bridge City News, the Medicine Shop Pharmacy and Lethbridge Soup Kitchen will be putting up a flu shot clinic tomorrow. The Salvation Army Winter Coat Drive has begun. And Iran has the fastest growing Christian population in the world.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Good evening, I'm Loris Alexander. Thank you for joining us. This is the time of year when many people consider getting a flu shot. Tomorrow, the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen will offer flu shots to anyone who needs it. The Soup Kitchen has teamed up with the Medicine Shop Pharmacy to offer this service. Flu season is here. And in a year when we're already dealing with a pandemic, this could be a big challenge. That's why this local pharmacist is thinking about the less fortunate.
This year we decided to organize the flu shots to vulnerable populations like our homeless neighbors and also at the shelters too. Because thing is that nobody approached them before and they are more like a left out. And especially right now with the COVID, they are at a higher risk. So we just wanted to give them a first priority over anybody else.
We like all forms of collaboration. When we have local businesses that step up and say, what can we do to help those that are in need, in particular our homeless neighbors. We do know that our guests are likely more vulnerable than many other people based on the lifestyle and based on the fact that they're outside a lot more than you and I. They don't often get the opportunity because if they were to go into a regular place with a flu shot, they probably would be frowned upon because they don't look as they should, perhaps. And so just having this opportunity to bring it right to our setting at the Soup Kitchen, make it available for them, not only them, but our many volunteers, our staff, and anyone else in the neighborhood that wishes to come.
The flu shot drive will take place on Monday, October 19th from 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. with no appointment necessary. With winter here, many are preparing to bundle up, including those who are most vulnerable in our community who rely on the generosity of others to keep warm. The Salvation Army is collecting new and gently used coats for their winter coat drive.
The winter coat drive has gone on for many, many years amongst many different organizations. The Salvation Army has always cared for people in the most basic of ways, so a coat drive is a very natural fit for us, right? And so we're talking about coats, we're talking about toques and hats, mitts, scarves, anything that would really help to keep people warm over the winter. God has called me to love people in simple ways, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, but putting a coat on a child's back or a pair of mittens on a child's hands to keep them warm in the winter, you can't get any more practical than that. And so we do it as a means of showing Christ's love to community and the love that we have as individuals for each other. I mean, that's how community works, and that's how it should be.
Bladen says donations can be dropped off at the back door of their office at 1302 4th Avenue South in Lethbridge, weekdays between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. The City of Lethbridge is looking for feedback on the current state of the River Valley. They will do this in the form of a 15-minute public engagement survey, which is being distributed. This survey will be mailed to every household in the city.
And what we're trying to determine is what do people use the River Valley for now? What are some concerns they have over the River Valley? What are some practices that they'd like to see as we start to plan moving forward? The River Valley is a very unique asset that we have here in the city. We're one of the few municipalities who have such a great natural resource that runs right through the heart of the city. But as we're finding populations expanding in Lethbridge, there's a lot of recreational use occurring in the River Valley, and we're definitely not trying to restrict or eliminate any recreation, but we want to make sure that we're also balancing that with preservation of the natural resources.
To complete the survey, you can visit the Get Involved Lethbridge website and click on the River Valley Engagement Project. Stunning Cameron Lake in Waterton Lakes National Park has reopened to the public. BCN's Micah Quinn has the story.
If you take a trip to the Acamina Parkway in Waterton Lakes National Park, you'll notice Cameron Lake at the far end, featuring some beautiful scenery,
A lot of people, of course, who hadn't driven there for quite some time were anxious to get there and have a look. The Cameron Lake area is a beautiful lake, and the drive there is very scenic, so it's quite popular. We're anticipating that anytime the weather permits, that it will still be a popular drive.
Road access to Cameron Lake has been reopened since October 1st, and just behind me, you'll see the aftermath of the 2017 Keno wildfire.
The Keno wildfire had affected about 39% of the park, so it was quite significant. There was quite a bit of work to be done since the Keno wildfire, and that's why it's been that long getting it done. There was a lot of work, extra work. We already had slated to do some road work on that, the Acamina Parkway leading to Cameron Lake, but because of the Keno wildfire, there was a bunch of other considerations.
Marshall says Parks Canada has mitigated the dangers that came on the road from the 2017 Keno wildfire.
Certainly there are always risks when you get into the backcountry, so we want people to be aware of that. It's a very narrow road. You need to drive slowly, a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. There's wildlife, cyclists, hikers, lots of things like that, and especially weather. And now that the snow will come, they really need to be careful when they're on the road.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
In spite of persecution, Iran has the fastest growing church in the world. It's often the Muslim converts who face the worst persecution. Greg Musselman interviews Dr. Hormoz Shariat, founder of Iran Alive Ministries.
In spite of an oppressive Islamic government in Iran and the social pressure against those who convert from Islam to Christianity, Iran has the fastest growing church in the world. It's absolutely amazing. And one of the people responsible for that growth is Dr. Hormoz Shariat. He is the president and founder of Iran Alive. Hormoz, great to have you back. How you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you, Greg. This is a historical opportunity with all the problems, the COVID challenge and everything else. God is working.
And that's the amazing thing is, before we started this interview, we were just talking about how, you and I travel a lot, speak a lot, and go international, and with COVID-19, we can't do that. But you're telling me that you have seen an incredible growth in your ministry.
That's right. We have expanded our ministry. We do a 24/7 satellite broadcast. We go over the heads of the mullahs into people's homes every day, every hour, and they are open. Iran is open. So during this time, most of the broadcast is from home, and we added to our program. We added a live prayer meeting, and which is very popular. We added a testimony program. We added a news and analysis of the today's event program. But the amazing thing is the response. It's more than 10 times number of salvations we have ever had in our 20 years of broadcast. Since May, we are seeing tenfold and more increase in the number of salvations that we know of. These are people who contact us. By the way, it's dangerous to call us and contact us, and we're blocked. It's hard to contact us. So even with that, we are getting over 500 declared salvations per week.
Recapping one of our top news stories. This is the time of year when many people consider getting a flu shot. Tomorrow, the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen will offer flu shots to anyone who needs it. The Soup Kitchen has teamed up with the Medicine Shop Pharmacy to offer the service. And a look at weekend weather. Tonight, cloudy with a few flurries in the evening, becoming light snow overnight. That's with a low of -6 and wind chill near -12. Tomorrow, cloudy with a mix of sun and cloud in the morning with a high of +4 and wind chill of -9 in the morning. Coming up after the break, Hal Roberts sits down with Julie Kissick, co-founder of Streets Alive Mission in Lethbridge.
I think that he should encourage the people to go to the proper OPS site because they've got medical staff there, they've got social workers, they've got addiction workers, they've got everything set up there to help the person from point A to point B instead of just getting stuck at point A.
Streets Alive Mission has been making a big difference here in our community for over 30 years. The amazing ministry helps many of our homeless in our community, including those with addictions. They feed them, clothe them, and help them get on their feet in a very big way. Joining me to talk about it is the co-founder of Streets Alive Mission, Julie Kissick, welcome back to Bridge City News, Julie.
Well, thank you, Hal. Good to be here.
So 30 years, 3 decades, does it feel like it?
Well, my hair says it's been 30 years, but it hasn't felt like 30 years at all for me. I look back at 30 years and it feels like just a short span of time because I love what I do. We absolutely love what we do. We feel called to do what we do. And so when you get up every morning and you love doing what you're doing, it does not feel like drudgery. It doesn't feel long.
You know, a few years ago, you took me on a tour of Streets Alive inside, and it really touched my heart in a big way. You showed me this mural with a lot of the clients on the mural. You knew the backstory. You know all about their lives. You remember their names, and most of those people had passed away. Mm-hmm. And I remember you had tears in your eyes as well at that moment.
Oh, some of those people became very important to us.
It's like family, right?
And they become like family because you do know them so well, and because you bury their children and you bury their parents and you bury all their aunties and uncles, and you hold them when they cry and you celebrate when they're having a good day, and they're just like our family.
Now, during the lockdown, Streets Alive did not close the doors but kept them open to help those who were desperately in need. How was that received in the community?
I think it was received really well. We were one of the few places that was open for them to come into, but one of the important things is that we trustee their money, and so nobody wants to separate anybody from the funds that they have, number one, and they still need clean clothes, and they still need a sandwich, and they still need a phone, and they still need to have that connection with people.
So what protocols, Julie, did you and Ken put in place at Streets Alive to protect yourselves, your volunteers, and your clients from COVID-19?
Well, here's the funny thing. We were told we had to use a lot of hand sanitizer, but they drink it. So
wow.
The first thing we did is
because the alcohol content, I guess, in there, right?
Sure. And now they come in Mickeys and 40s and stuff like that, so it's like very attractive. But we opened up a hand washing station, we opened a bathroom, took the toilet out, and just nobody could have any kind of a service unless they washed their hands. And of course, the staff is masked, and we offer masks to all of the clientele that come through the door. So if they want to access our service, they have to wash up their hands and wear a mask.
Now, one of the branches of your ministry is the new Segway Women's House. What is your real vision for this home?
How much time do you have?
Well, we've got another 10
another
minutes
47
or so.
seconds.
Yeah.
The vision that I have for this home is to have a place for women who have nowhere else to go. I was volunteering in the jail right up until COVID, and time after time women would be leaving my chapel service crying because they had nowhere to go except back to their old situation. And they come out of detox, they have nowhere to go but back to the old situation or treatment, back to the old situation. And I wanted to be able to offer them an alternative until they were healthy enough to maybe even face the old situation. And so it's imperative when we help people in recovery that they have a home. They have to have a roof. If you don't have a roof, you don't have the opportunity to recover. If you don't have a bed, if you don't have 3 squares, you have no opportunity to recover. So,
how do you get that message across to a lot of your clients that you have to change your surroundings, you have to change your bad habits, and even some of the people you hang out with, which is very difficult for a lot of people, especially if they've been on the streets with a lot of these other people they call friends, right?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge to help them get to that place where they're able to say goodbye, because we could force it, but we all know the law kills. Or we could talk to them, and through the programming and instruction and perspective change, they get to the place where they kind of go, hey, you're unhealthy and toxic for me, so I'm going to actually choose not to be with you. And when they get to that point, that's a powerful point in their life.
And don't you have some staff or volunteers that help out that maybe went through the program, that were homeless or addicted at one point in time?
Oh yeah, we're up to armpits in them.
Right?
Yeah, and now, like through COVID, we still continue to do our supportive housing, and the men and the women who were in the housing were just so grateful that they had a job to do while we went through that, and they became the big supporters of people that were coming to all the services. They were just like, hey, I made it, you can make it. I've done this for 6 months, you can do it for 6 days, and it's just been amazing.
Now, Streets Alive is a ministry very similar to what we have here at the Miracle Channel. How do you integrate God and Christ's saving grace into the discussion when it comes to helping people off the street?
Well, I think that we're fortunate in that people know we are a Christian mission. And so there's a certain expectation that Christianity is going to come out of our mouth. They have an expectation when I sit up beside them and I'm like, hey, can I pray for you? They expect that. And then they always say yes. And my prayer is always that God would touch their heart with his love so that they could have hope to change. Because love changes everything.
Let's talk a bit about Segway Women's Home once again. Now, an online housewarming for the home is taking place. What kind of a response have you gotten from the community on that?
Probably not as big as I had hoped. I think things have been kind of confusing with the registry that we picked. So now we're just going out there and saying, give us money or give us stuff. We need everything a home could need. It's got, it's going to be 20 beds, but it's got 8 bathrooms. It's got 3 laundry rooms. It has 2 kitchens, and it has 13 bedrooms.
Any nurseries as well?
No nurseries. No,
Okay,
no.
right.
That's the next step.
Okay,
Single
gotcha.
moms. That'll be our next step. Come on, Hal, give me a chance here. We haven't even got
How
to
about
this
beanbag
step.
chairs and lava lamps? Would you accept those?
Lava lamps all day long.
Oh, I love
Beanbag
that.
chairs, no.
Okay.
No.
When are you hoping to open?
Well, we're hoping to open December 1. But it's been a problem for the construction because COVID slowed down everything, including the ability to get materials, the ability to have enough people on site to get the work done. I just got notified this week that my furniture is delayed. So there's all kinds of delays that are happening. You want tile, it's delayed, flooring. Yeah. So December 1, in Jesus' name, December 1.
So a lot of people in the community making donations to help out. And
You know, through COVID, this community has been tremendous. What a tremendous community. They've just given, and I know that a lot of them are hurting. But we've got people come in with just a set of towels, or we got people come in with $25, buy what you need, and coffee pots, and sheets, and bedding, and all that other kind of stuff. So we have a really generous community. I'm pretty proud of our community.
So Julie, what's needed right now?
Besides money?
Yeah, well, we could always use money, right?
Yeah, we
but
can
I mean,
always
how about
use
clothing?
money.
Winter's just around the corner.
Hoodies. For Streets Alive, hoodies, we always need jeans. No matter how many times we get jeans, they disappear like that. When you think that we might serve 25 to 40 people per day, that's 25 to 40 pairs of pants, shirts, socks, underwear. So we're always out of underwear. We don't like secondhand underwear. We like fresh, clean underwear. Walmart has a great deal, just throw that out there. We always need hoodies so they can layer up. We always need jeans, usually men's 30 to 34.
Socks?
Socks all day long because they get to change their socks every day. We can't change their shoes every day, but we can change their socks every day.
What about gloves and tubes
Gloves,
and scarves?
that's coming up,
right?
but probably we're not giving them out yet because the weather's too warm still. But once the weather gets cold, yeah, I think last year we went through 6,000 or 7,000 pairs of gloves.
The government likes to keep tabs on numbers, like Stats Canada. 30 years, how many clients do you think you have served with Streets Alive?
A lot? I don't know. It's just a lot. It's been a lot.
How many would you average a day, you know, through the programs?
But through the programs and the trusteeship, about 150 a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you're also developing an 8-plex home for men.
Yeah, excited.
What are some of the needs there?
Everything. We need everything there. We do have a fair amount of furniture because we've been collecting furniture with our warehouse. And so we let agencies have their first pick of everything, and then we have enough to probably be able to share a little bit into that 8-plex. But same thing, we don't have dishes, bath towels, tea towels, laundry soap, cushions, Chesterfields, chair, like everything. We need everything. And it's an 8-plex, and each plex has 2 bedrooms. So that's 16 bedrooms that we have to furnish. So 16 lava lamps, folks.
That's a lot of lava lamps.
That's a lot of lava lamps.
And beanbag chairs. I love
And
that.
beanbag chairs.
Julie, the supervised consumption site at Arches shut down after the province did its audit, the $1.6 million in funds that weren't accounted for, so the province shut it down. Now the province instituted a mobile SES by the soup kitchen in Lethbridge here. Is the province doing enough to help a lot of those who are addicted?
It's not called an SCS anymore. It's called an opioid prevention site.
Right.
And so the SCS allowed all kinds of different drug use, whereas the OPS is intravenous drug use. Okay. So that's probably narrowed the field a little bit. I have an opinion regarding intravenous drug use. I pretty much keep it to myself because
This is the forum, come on.
I've seen too many dead people.
Okay.
I've seen too many people die from putting poison in their veins. But I understand the concept of it.
So how do you feel about people like Tim Slaney, used to work at Arches with the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society, putting up these pop-up tents at Galt Gardens, down by the Civic Center, the field.
I think that,
you know, they're unsanctioned.
I think that he should encourage the people to go to the proper OPS site, because they've got medical staff there, they've got social workers, they've got addiction workers, they've got everything set up there to help the person from point A to point B instead of just getting stuck at point A. So I think they're actually doing a disservice to the addicted population.
Let's talk about for a moment the importance of providing a safe place for people as they go through recovery. Tell me a bit about that, how important that is.
It is so important that it is safe, but also that it is structured. There has to be a purpose while they're living this that safe existence. So we do a lot of psychoeducational stuff, we do a lot of 12-step stuff, we do boundary work, we do all the work that is necessary for them to be able to find their own place of safety after they've been safe with us. So that's our goal. It's like recovery is real, we've seen it, it works, and we know how to help people get to point B.
Julie, do you in Ken at Streets Alive see a lot of transient people coming in from other towns or cities, or is it mostly local people here in southwestern Alberta?
Well, we saw, you know, a year or so ago, we saw a fairly significant influx from other centers, and part of it was the SES.
Like other centers, meaning from Calgary?
Yeah,
or?
oh yeah, we saw lots of different people, because we would see they would come in for clothing. We would like, where are you from? What's your name? So we saw all these strange people we didn't know come into the building. And we've also seen lately that some of them have transitioned back, possibly to old stomping grounds or whatever, so.
Let's talk about some of the victories that you've seen as well, involving your clients. I mean, we mentioned some of them before who went on to become volunteers or work with you here at Streets Alive, but just some of those tremendous victories.
One or two of the victories that I think of right away is one lady who came to us out of detox, so she'd only been, you know, detoxed for 7 days, and we put her in the house, and she stayed with us for 2 years. So the first year, she worked her way through all of our programming, and the second year, she started at the university taking her social working and addictions degree. And by the time she left, she was already a year into that degree, going strong, stable, able to function and do really well. I'm in contact with women who have exited the housing and are back working in their jobs. They've got their kids back working with their kids. So I hear from a lot of the people that have exited the program in a healthy and safe way. We do have some that exit in a not very healthy and safe way, but we do have a significant amount that still stay in touch, and they've gone on to live the lives that they had hoped they could have.
I've chatted with some members of the Lethbridge Police Department here, and they say a big issue right now when it comes to the drugs, it's not so much fentanyl, but it's methamphetamine.
Meth.
Are you seeing that as well?
Well, about 10 years ago, we saw a huge increase in meth, and back then, the people called it Lethbridge. Like, I know it's just been coined within the last year or two, but we heard it 10 years ago, this is Lethbridge. We saw people transition from pills and alcohol and stuff into meth. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we watched them transition their meth to take it intravenously. So yeah, meth is the key drug in our city.
Now, do you have, you talked about opioids as well, do you have naloxone kits there too? Of course. You have to have lots of those on hand?
Yeah, on hand and with our outreach team.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, we've just contracted to have a special counselor come into Streets Alive to help them decompress from overdoses. And it was worse about a month ago, but still they have to be able to have somewhere where they can start to talk about somebody just coming back to life and taking a swing at them.
Wow. What kind of training do your volunteers have to go through in order to be able to handle a lot of what they're seeing?
I wish I could remember the term, but our operations director, he does a non-violent intervention course that he runs with our staff like every year or every 6 months, however he sees that needs to happen, so that we learn not to engage up close and personal, but how to de-escalate situations. So, but I'll say with meth, it's hard.
I can imagine.
They're just so amped up on the speed, and that sometimes they don't even hear your voice.
Wow.
So the best time for us to reach out to them is when they're starting to come down off the meth, and yeah.
So in your opinion, how can we curtail a lot of the drug use in our city and keep the drugs out of our city?
You know, we've had a lot of people say, how can we get drugs out of our city? Well, they tried prohibition with the alcohol, and we all know how that worked. Everything went underground. And I think that the drug use is with us until the end of time, because there are always going to be people who are hurt and looking for an anesthetic. And
they're trying to fill that void.
And they're trying
not with
to fill
God,
that,
but with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, they don't know how to go to God. They don't know how to accept His love and let that love work with them, because that's a slow process, and they want the fast process. They want the drug that's going to just take a hold of them, make them feel better instantly. So
quick fix.
It is, and it's a powerful fix. Wow. So for people to just say, well, just stop using, it is just not that easy.
Julie Kissick, co-founder of Streets Alive Mission here in Lethbridge, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We are living in unprecedented times of physical, emotional, and spiritual battles that can cause fear, anxiety, and even depression. These can take a terrible toll on our bodies, minds, and our souls. Many believe that in order to win these battles, we need to learn how to protect ourselves with biblical spiritual principles. Joining me now to talk about it is Adam Davis, a former police officer and author of the book called On Spiritual Combat. Welcome to Bridge City News, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me on today. What a great time to be alive.
Amen, it sure is. Tell me about this book on spiritual combat. What prompted you to write it?
You know, my co-author and I, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, this was really a project that was based on his book that sold over 500,000 copies on combat. So we wanted to take the psychological and physiological principles from that book and look at what the scripture says. What does God's word have to say about deadly force encounters? What does it say about combat? What does it say about preparing? So we wanted to provide some basic tools. Think of this like spiritual warfare training 101. Like you go to basic police academy or basic training for military. Your first day, your first 3 months is learning the essentials. So that's what we really wanted to do, was provide some insight. And this was just based on some conversations we've had with first responders and military service members across the globe. And it's been very well received.
So Adam, oftentimes we don't really prepare ourselves for a tragedy. How can we do so with not being overly consumed with fear and anxiety?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, fear, you know, there's a study out, and I don't have the exact link to that right now, but I can get it to you. There's a study out that shows that our brains, the same trigger in our mind that responds to drug addiction and other forms of addiction, responds to fear the same way. So if we are understanding that hope, it can be more addictive than fear, that we have to be intentional about spending time in God's word, spending time in prayer, and having a lifestyle that is a lifestyle of worship, literally a lifestyle that honors Him in everything we do. We understand that the enemies come to give, to kill, to steal, destroy. God sent His Son, Jesus. He sent His Son to give us abundant life. So practical principles puts into place that His word is the answer we need. A relationship with Jesus is the answer we need. But if we take these principles and say, how does this relate psychologically? How does this relate with our actions and our contribution in society? Then that means that we take the principles of His word, we prepare ourselves through time in worship and studying the word and knowing how to respond to conflict and tragedy. Jesus told us, in this world you will have trouble. It wasn't you may have trouble. He said you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. He is the only answer. And when we have a relationship with Him and His word abides in us and we in Him, we become more than conquerors in a world run by the enemy.
Now, you worked as a police officer, Adam. Tell me about your experience dealing with people who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder.
You know, there's a lot of people that deal with this, and a lot of times we limit that description to individuals who have served in some capacity, whether a first responder or military. But it also applies to individuals who have been sexually abused or traumatized or abused in some other form. And we often neglect those things. At the age of 5, I was sexually abused. I've talked about that openly. Didn't address it for 20 years, nearly 20 years before I addressed it, because I wanted to hold on to that pain. I was afraid of dealing with it. I didn't want to address it. And so you deal with the exposure that first responders, specifically in the case that I'm talking about, law enforcement officers, that they deal with day in and day out. Let me tell you something. Human beings were never created to see or experience the things that our men and women of law enforcement deal with day in and day out. The violence, the evil, the hate, they were not intended. They were not created to witness that, to see it, to deal with it. But through proper training and equipping ourselves with His word, we're still human beings. We're still human beings. And we try to carry those things in our own strength and power. So when we rely on the strength of God with the wisdom the peace that only He can give us, then we can become more effective in our job. It's a dangerous, delicate situation. We shouldn't stereotype people if they have a designation or a diagnosis rather of post-traumatic stress. We should show them more care, and there should be systems in place where first responders are taken care of, not just for that incident, but for life. We should take care of them if they are serving our communities and it has an effect on them. And we have to do a better job of holding elected officials and appointed officials accountable and taking care of our public servants.
So with some of the struggles you've been through, I mean, you were assaulted, you said it at a very young age, also as a police officer, some of the things you must have witnessed. Did you struggle with PTSD yourself? Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, I woke up, I had night sweats, had nightmares, panic attacks, all the symptoms. Now, I never went to a doctor and received a diagnosis, but I can tell you all the symptoms were there. I could go through all the list of things. And how we respond to stress and traumatic experiences often looks like bad behavior or being reckless or things of that nature, because we're constantly chasing this chemical reaction that our bodies have when we're dealing with high stress situations. So for me, it was a case of how do I respond to this? Because I get to the point to where deep down in here, I feel hopeless and completely useless because I feel broken. Warriors aren't supposed to feel this way. We're supposed to be invincible. And that's just not the case. We have to come to the understanding that we're human beings. And the reason Jesus came for us is because we're broken. And without Him, we're nothing. And so when I began to see, I can't do this on my own, I can't carry this burden on my own, it became overwhelming and crushing. And it was just various experiences. I was never shot. I was never stabbed. I never took anybody's life. But it was just constantly seeing the evil around us, and some other incidents that I was a part of. I found myself not sleeping well. I found myself waking up with nightmares, drenched in sweat, panicking and not responding well in different situations, and even shutting down and sort of zoning out when I was with my family.
How much did your family help you? Tell me about that.
Yeah. My wife was, she was an absolute divine appointment for me. She demonstrated the unconditional love of Christ, because she would sit and want to talk to me when I come home from my shift. I'm totally shut down. So understanding how to address these things from a spouse perspective, look at what signs to look for, look at what sort of red flags to look for, and then how to address them. And so that's very important that we do have those conversations, and that's probably something for a later date. But certainly she helped me by not pushing me. And I'll tell you a real quick story. I know that you're limited on time, but towards the end of my career in law enforcement, she recognized these things. And so on a Friday, I got off duty, and I come home, and she said, "My mom is keeping the kids. We've got a lodge arranged for us in a place away, from about 6 hours away." And so we went to the mountains. We went horseback riding. We spent time away. She said, "I recognize that you were exhausted and you needed a break." So recognizing that and taking those steps and just listening to me and being there and being present. And sometimes we're hard to love when we're going through those things, and understanding that that's when we need you the most.
Horseback riding sounds like a lot of fun right now, especially up by the mountains.
It does.
Now, what's your message, Adam, to people who are struggling with the impact of tragedy in their lives?
Yeah. Let me tell you, my tragedy, your tragedy are different. They're all different. But let me tell you what isn't different. That's the pain we feel inside. That pain we feel is the same. It's deep and it's overwhelming, and sometimes it feels like you can't breathe. For me, I've been there. But there's a real peace found in a relationship with God through His Son Jesus. There is a real peace available when we rely on the power of the Holy Spirit. Let me tell you, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead on the third day resides in you if you're a believer. And if you're not, all you have to do is call on Him. Call on Him wherever you're at, and He will respond. I can guarantee you, if you'll call on Him, He'll respond. I dare you to try Him. Relying on that peace, get into the Word. Find people around you that have walked through the season that you're in, the things that you've gone through, and connect with those people. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Find a local pastor, a local minister, different groups. One of the things I do is help a group called Reboot Recovery. We have small groups around the country. We're steadily deploying these groups around the country. And I think there's some in Canada, deploying these groups around the country where we are removing the barrier of isolation because that's so dangerous. So having that courage to take a step and say, I need help. And I have a lot of officers that reach out to me from all over the country and Canada, Germany. And it's important that we're willing to get over that initial, I don't want to talk to anybody about this, and so that we can move forward. And it's important to have that and understand the power of faith and resiliency.
Now, you mentioned reaching out to a pastor, Adam. No battles we face should ever be fought alone. No man or woman is an island. What should we know about choosing confidence and mentors that include our spouses or friends or pastors, like you mentioned earlier?
I think it's important to look at people who are around you who have been through something. Look at somebody and the resilient spirit that they've displayed. They've been through some stuff. And you find the people that have been through some stuff and that are willing to love you through your stuff. That's what Jesus does. That's what he did. He met the woman at the well. He wasn't afraid of engaging drama and changing the narrative in the middle of it. He wasn't afraid of addressing death and pain and changing the tone of that conversation. Jesus did that. And so when we want to look for somebody, we want to look for somebody that's compassionate, somebody that's qualified. And what qualifies them is their resiliency, that they've overcome this stuff and that they're willing to talk to you and be confidential about it and get you further help if you need it.
Now, you're right that prayer and fasting can actually make us stronger warriors. Tell me more about that.
Some things we can only overcome with prayer and fasting. And for the past several months, I have put out a national call across the United States. If you aren't living under a rock and you see some of the events that are occurring in America today, you know that this is a season for the body of Christ to come to life, to awake the sleeping, slumbering saints. And this should be a time of fasting and prayer for law enforcement. What it does is it removes us from our reliance upon our flesh and our own wisdom and knowledge. And it reminds us that our strength and our source comes from God himself. And it comes from a relationship with him. And when we take the time to rely on him and be intentional about trusting him and walking in what I call flashlight faith, you know, his word said that his word is a lamp to my feet, a light to my path. I call it flashlight faith. I can't see the whole path, but I can see what's in front of me. And that's all he's called me to do, is take the very next step. And that's all he's calling you to do, is take the next step. Maybe it's the next step towards healing. Maybe it's the next step in equipping yourself and preparing yourself for spiritual warfare. And fasting and prayer is a great way to do that.
Now, training is also very important with anything, for a new job or if you're an athlete preparing for a major sporting event. Adam, you say training should include prayer drills. What are some of the elements of prayer drills?
Oh my goodness! You think about, you go through the Psalms. You look at some of the Psalms that you have, and David had some great prayers. So you think about how we go through firing drills, or we go through shooting drills, and all of these prayer drills that we talk about are listed in the book, and they're great resources. I'm not going to give them away, but I want to tip you out here. When you're a first responder, law enforcement officer, whether you're in the military, and you're learning to shoot with a firearm or you're learning to operate different weapons, there's different drills you go through. You want to spend the time becoming familiar. You don't have to have complex, complicated, big words. You want to spend the time to become familiar, and that it's part of everything you do. Just like when you breathe, there's tactical breathing to help you deal with panic attacks or anxiety or high stress. You want that to become part of who you are, because of your everyday life that you have, that it doesn't matter what happens. That's your first step.
Now, sometimes we face multiple threats all at the same time. What's important to remember during those moments?
Focus on the one who gives us victory. I'll tell you this. I had a dream recently that I was hiding behind a really big rock, and it was a giant red rock. And I was hiding behind this rock, and there were rounds being shot down where I was at from somebody down the road or down the range. And there were one round after another. And I remember hearing, "Be still." And "be still" to me meant I wasn't qualified. Initially, it meant I wasn't qualified to address the threat. But what it was God saying, "Be still, because I'm going to go take care of the threat down here, so that when you move in your next mission of battle, you're moving forward in victory. So sometimes we have to understand that it's small, subtle changes, small, subtle adjustments. Like if you're adjusting the scope on a firearm, it's not drastic changes, it's small, subtle changes that mean the difference between a hit on target or completely missing your target. So understanding, like in that case, it wasn't that I wasn't qualified or wasn't ready. It was he was literally protecting my journey so that I can move forward in victory. Listen when you pray. Listen to what his word says. He still speaks. His word is alive and well today. I wrote a book in 2017. It released in 2018. It's called Behind the Badge. It's a daily devotion for law enforcement. It's a bestseller in Canada and the United States. I wrote it 3 years ago. If you go and read some of the entries that are today, you would have thought that I had some kind of knowledge for what's going on today. That tells us his word is alive and well, and it speaks life. Wherever you are, no matter what you're going through, go to that word and spend time in it daily.
Adam Davis, former police officer and author of the book On Spiritual Combat. Thanks for joining me today from Alabama.
Hey, thank you so much, Hal, for having me.
Michael Zwagstra is a public high school teacher and author. He has extensive experience teaching a wide variety of grade levels and currently teaches high school in Manitoba, high school social studies. He has a new book out called The Naked Man Flees, and it's not exactly what you're thinking. Michael joins me now via Skype from Steinbach, Manitoba. Welcome back to BCN, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Hal. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, you've previously written 2 books and articles on education policy. Why now have you decided to write a book about the Bible?
Well, the Bible has obviously been an area of interest of mine for a long time. And while I have written books on education policy, and that's what I'm well known for across the country commenting on, I'm also very passionate about the Bible. I believe that there's a lack of biblical literacy out there, not just among non-Christians, but frankly, even among many Christians, that we get a very superficial understanding where if you're relying just on popularized movies and maybe listening to some sermons and remembering what you learned in Sunday school, you're going to miss a whole lot of valuable information that's in the Bible and things that's worth learning. And so I decided it was time to write a book that pointed out some of these passages that commonly get overlooked and take a look at what they really mean.
Okay, we got to talk about this title, The Naked Man Flees. Makes a few people chuckle here. How did you come up with that name?
Well, the Naked Man Flees is also the title of one of the chapters, and it references a couple of verses in Mark chapter 14, verses 51 and 52. And that's the story of where Jesus has just been arrested by the guards, and he's about to be taken into custody. And it mentions that there was a young man who had been following behind, and the guards seized him, and he ran away, and he left his linen garment behind, and he ran away naked. And it's just this bizarre 2 verses. It appears only in the Gospel of Matthew, nowhere else in the Bible. We never see any direct reference to this man again. And a lot of people just miss that. They just go, well, what's this doing in here? And what I point out in my book is that actually there's a number of things we can learn from it. But one of the key things is, yeah, it's an odd event. It's the type of thing that you wouldn't expect a reference to a naked man running away to make it into a holy, sacred account regarding the arrest of the Son of God. But it is the type of thing you would expect to find in a real historical book describing what actually happened, and that the only reason for Mark to even put this in his gospel is because it happened. It's bizarre, it's strange, and it's yet powerful support for the veracity, for the truthfulness of the reporting that we find in the Gospels.
Michael, why is it that Christians and non-Christians alike tend to overlook certain parts of the Bible when they read it?
Well, there's a number of reasons, but the key thing is that our brains tend to go with what is most familiar. And so we get used to certain patterns, and we tend to look at things based on how we've commonly understood it. And so what that means is that we miss details that don't really fit with what we commonly understand. And the book starts where I show a little triangle, and I ask people, what does it say within it? And most people who read this triangle will think it says Paris in the spring, but it actually doesn't. There's actually an extra word in there, an extra the, that almost everyone misses because you're so used to seeing the phrase Paris in the spring, we miss that it actually says something a little extra. And it's similar when we look at our Bibles that, we know the story of Abraham and Moses and David, and it's so easy to miss the aspects of their character and their personalities that don't fit the popular narrative. And there's a lot of those things like that. And that's why Christians and non-Christians alike tend to miss these things when they're reading their Bibles.
Now let's talk a bit about Abraham. Your first chapter is titled, Abraham Shoos the Vultures Away. What are you discussing specifically in this chapter here?
Well, in Genesis chapter 15, God at one point is telling Abraham that he is going to inherit the land of Canaan. He's going to be the father of a great nation. And what happens is that Abraham then asks God, how can I know that this will be so? And instead of giving a straightforward answer, we see from verses 7 to 11, God telling Abraham to offer a sacrifice. And he has to bring a heifer, a goat, and a few other sacrificial animals. And then he has to cut them in half. And he then lays them on opposite sides from each other, and he walks in between them. And the passage then says in verse 11 that he shooed the vultures away until the evening. He actually kept the vultures from eating the carcasses. And then after that, we see the dialogue resume between God and Abraham. Now, again, because this is a famous chapter dealing with the great promise that God is giving to Abraham, we tend to gloss over this is a whole day that Abraham spent at this sacrifice. He not only had to bring these animals, he had to cut them in half. Think about the amount of gore and blood involved and how difficult it would have been for this old man to do this. And then he's walking in between them, and then he's keeping the vultures away. It's a powerful story of Abraham showing that his faith was real, that this following God's commands was so important that he was going to follow it exactly as God said. And he also knew, I can't just let the vultures come and eat the sacrifice that I've offered up to God. I have to protect them. And so he spent the day doing that. And it shows that that he followed up his faith with good works. Because, of course, as we know as Christians, good works come about as a result of our faith. And Abraham demonstrated it in that section.
Now, another interesting chapter is called God Almost Kills Moses. Tell me more about that one.
Well, in Exodus chapter 4, most people know the story of Moses encountering God at the burning bush, and God telling him, "You're going to be leading the Israelites out of Egypt." And Moses is then on his way back to Egypt, and then we know that afterwards that Moses meets Pharaoh and makes the demand. But in between, while he's in the wilderness, there are 3 verses 24 to 26, where it says that on his way back, God met Moses and was going to kill him, until his wife Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised Moses' son right then and there. And as a result of that, God did not kill Moses. And we don't see that incident in the movie The 10 Commandments. You don't see it in Prince of Egypt, and you don't hear about it in a lot of sermons. But again, there's a lesson here. Moses didn't do something that was absolutely fundamental. He didn't circumcise his own son. There were a few things that were more disobedient among Jewish people at that time than to not circumcise their own son. And there was no way that Moses could lead the Israelites out of Egypt if that had been left unresolved. And so it's a reminder to us today that if you've been called into ministry, right, or to lead an organization, make sure you've taken care of the fundamentals first before you just go ahead and take that position. If you're going to be the leader of a pro-family lobby group, you better make sure your marriage is in good shape first. Take care of the fundamentals, just like Moses should have.
It's funny, your book almost reminds me of a Cole's Notes version of the Bible. The analysis and getting a little more in depth with it, and then maybe summarize it a little bit more. Now, your book, The Naked Man Flees, Michael, has 40 chapters, half about the Old Testament, the other half about the New Testament. I thought maybe you'd focus a little more on the New Covenant.
Yeah, I did this deliberately. I chose to, and of course, 40 is the number of completion too, so there's that biblical reference. So it's a complete book. But I chose to go half and half because I want to make it clear that the Old Testament and the New Testament are equally important. Christians, it's tempting to skip the Old Testament and just go straight to the New Testament. And I understand why. The New Testament makes things more explicit and direct. But the Old Testament is where you find the foundations. It's the Old Testament that Paul is speaking about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, when he says that all Scripture is inspired by God. And so you can't really fully understand the New Testament if you don't read the Old Testament. And so I wanted to make sure in this book that I gave equal attention to both the Old and New Testament because they're both important for Christians today.
Now, do you believe that the stories you talk about in your book actually happened, or are they simply symbolic of a deeper spiritual meaning?
I believe the stories actually happened. Throughout the book, I take a high view of Scripture. So I believe that the incidents that have happened in regards to Abraham and Moses and all of the others, I believe they occurred as actually described within the Bible. Obviously, we have to read the Bible according to the genre that the different books are written in. I recognize that. But in the historical narrative where it's describing things that happened, whether it was the miracles that Jesus did or the events described in the Old Testament, I believe the appropriate thing to do as Christians is to take the Bible at its word. And so I do believe the stories happened as described.
So what benefit would Christians really receive from reading your book?
Well, I think Christians would hopefully gain a deeper appreciation for the Bible. And it's really easy sometimes to come to the idea that, I've kind of been there, done that. I'm pretty familiar with the Bible already. And we get bored in our Bible reading in our devotions. And so this book is intended to shake people up a little bit and to make them notice, whoa, there's some parts of the Bible that I might have missed before. And I wonder how many other parts of the Bible I've been missing. Maybe I need to read the Bible a bit more carefully. Maybe I shouldn't just stick to the well-worn, one verse a day devotional guide, which tends to pick the easy verses with the obvious application. Maybe I should get back to reading the Bible itself and not skip over chapters that I think are difficult. And so I really hope that my book inspires people to take more time reading the Bible itself.
Now, you've also done media interviews about your book on secular radio stations. Why would non-Christians be interested in your book?
Yeah, I have done a number of interviews on some pretty major secular radio stations where the majority audience is non-Christian, and each of the hosts that interviewed me was definitely non-Christian. But I believe that non-Christians should read the Bible too, because obviously as a Christian, I want them to read it because I hope it brings them to faith in Jesus. But even before that, just to have a better understanding of our history and our culture, it makes sense to read the Bible and have some understanding of it. And one of the interviews I did was with a radio host who asked me a series of questions about the book. He had actually started his interview saying, "This is going to be interesting because I'm an atheist, and here I am talking about the Bible." And by the end of the interview, he had said, "You've convinced me. I'm going to get a copy of your book. Maybe I need to, as an atheist, start reading the Bible because there's some stuff in there that I need to become more familiar with." And so, if it could be a witness and to get more people to look at the Bible and not just have it sit on their shelves, then that's what I'm hoping happens.
Hey, did you follow up to see if this person gave their life to Christ?
Well, the interview was only last week, and so I don't think that it's going to happen quite that quickly. But I certainly would hope that does happen, and I do hope to be able to talk to him again. I am on that show on a fairly regular basis talking about education issues, and so I do want to look for opportunities to ask the question.
And you know what? At the end of the day, the seed has been planted, so that's wonderful. Now, some would say, "Hey, Michael Swagster, you're not a pastor. Why should I buy into this?" Do you have any theological training?
You're right. I'm not a pastor, and most of my obviously experience and training in education is in the field of education, including a master's degree in educational administration. But I also have a Master of Arts in Theological Studies from Liberty University, and I completed that degree about 4 years ago. And so I do have some academic training in the area of theology. And obviously, I have my personal reading that I've done over the years and teaching. But I do have a master's degree in theological studies, and on a part-time basis, I do teach at Steinbeck Bible College as an adjunct professor, where I've taught courses on history and theology and ethics, and so I do believe I have some reasonable credentials in this area.
Now, where can people actually pick up a copy of your book, Michael?
Well, the simplest way to get it, because it's just out, would be to go to Amazon. If you go to Amazon.ca and you type in "The Naked Man Flees," it'll pop up pretty quickly. Either that or type in my name and it'll come up pretty quickly there. And I do expect to start getting into some bookstores in the not too distant future. But obviously right now, with everything being slowed down by COVID, the fastest way at this point, if you want to get a copy of the book, is just go to Amazon and type in the name of the book, "The Naked Man Flees," and it'll pop up pretty fast.
Could "The Naked Man Flees" be used as a private devotional or maybe in a Sunday school class? I bet you kids will probably get a kick out of that title.
Yeah, I believe it could. And the chapters are short. I mean, there's 40 chapters, and each chapter is about 1,200 to 1,500 words, and so it could be used as a devotional. In fact, one of the people I had involved in editing the book turned it into that as he was doing his editing. He said that as he would edit one chapter a day, and he said, I just made it my devotional. And so that's where I sort of thought that, well, I wonder if maybe others could do that too. But it could also be a great book to use in Sunday school, both at the high school level and in an adult class. I think there could be some great discussion from it. I've taught adult Sunday school for many years, and these are the types of topics I can assure you that get people interested in discussions. And Sunday school is a great opportunity to do that. And I think this book could be a good resource for Sunday school classes.
Does your book try to settle long-standing theological scores such as Calvinism, the age of the earth, or infant versus adult baptism?
No, that is not the purpose of the book. I take an approach somewhat similar to C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity approach. I guess in this case, I'd sort of go with mere evangelical Christianity, because it is an explicitly evangelical book. It is in that regard. But I'm very clear in the book that I'm not getting into the mode and the time of baptism as part of the debate, or the proper interpretation of Revelation. Those are important issues, and I think it's worthwhile for Christians to look into them and explore them. And I've got views on all of those, as do most Christians. But that's not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to get people into the Bible and to get them thinking for themselves. And I'm not interested in settling theological scores. This is scores. This is not going to be the book that resolves all those issues.
Teacher and author of the book The Naked Man Flees, Michael Zwijgstra, thanks for joining me today from Steinbach, Manitoba.
Well, thanks very much, Hal. It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.